Hello guys, welcome to the Git tutorial series. This course was designed for beginners. So if you are a beginner or you are new to version control, this is the right place to start. If you're already familiar with Git or you are coming in from another version control system, this course is still designed to take you through step by step. In this series, we are going to start from the basics to get you up and running quickly. We will look at what Git is and why it is important in software development. We also look at how to get and install Git. And then we're going to take a short detour through GitHub. We will touch on a few things like creating repositories and authentication. And then finally, we will jump into practically applying all the commands we've learned from initializing a local Git repository to pushing to a remote repository. By the end of this series, you will have a solid grasp of the Git workflow where you'll be able to create repositories and manage your files with Git. If you're ready, let's jump right in.
Git is a distributed version control system that helps developers track changes made to their code. There are two major types of version control systems. We have a distributed version control system like Git, and then there is a centralized version control system like Apache Subversion. A distributed version control system, a DVCS for short, is a type of version control system that allows multiple users to collaboratively manage and track changes to files in a project. In this tutorial, repo, repository, and project are used interchangeably. So with that out of the way, we can continue. Now, central version control systems were the standard before DVCSs showed up. And in a centralized version control system, there's usually a central database hosting the repo where the users can check out the files in that project. The term distributed in a distributed version control system means that each user has their own copy of the entire project repo, including a full history of every change made to that repo. In contrast, a centralized version control system hosts a repository that users interact with on a remote server, alright. However, that repository can only be accessed on that server. Now the disadvantage is that should the central repo or the database go down, or should the server disk corrupt in any way, users won't have access to the project, and in worst case scenarios, the repo could be lost forever. But because Git is distributed, such situations are easily mitigated because our project exists both locally and remotely. Now Git helps us to keep track of changes made to source code and other project files over the lifetime of a project. Git does this by allowing developers to maintain a complete record of a project from the beginning of the project, including who made what changes and when. So software development projects can be huge with code bases reaching billions of lines of code. Now consider this. Your average Chrome browser has over 6 million lines of code. That's how important a version control is. It cannot be overstated. Now, one important part of version control is tracking. With Git, you can see exactly what changes were made in each commit, and this is helpful for debugging and understanding the project's overall history. Git also allows us to do collaborative development by allowing multiple developers to work on the same project at the same time. Changes can be made in parallel or can be made on different branches and then merged together later. Talking about branching, Git supports the creation of branches. Now branches are like separate rooms in a big house. So consider this analogy. The big house is your project and a room in that house is your branch. So say in your house you have your gym, you have a cellar, you have a place where you do your learning or an office. So these little portions of the house are what we call branches in Git. And this allows teams to work on different aspects of a project, whether developing new features or fixing bugs or any sort of extra work that needs to be done in a project. You can do all without disrupting the main code base, which means that you can still work and then add your work to the overall project without causing any hiccups or problems in the project. Now branches can be merged back, which is what I'm talking about. So because they can be merged, we can work separately and then fully bring them back together to form a complete work. Also, if there is a problem that arises or there is a mistake that is made, Git is easily able to revert your code back to a previous version of the code. This ability to move or go back in time allows the project to maintain its integrity. It is a powerful feature of maintaining the stability of a project. And then finally, by storing the entire history of a project locally and remotely, Git acts as a form of backup. So Git has a local copy and a remote copy. Should the local copy be lost, the project's history can be retrieved from a remote repository and vice versa. Now be reminded that a major requirement to get a job as a developer these days is to know some form of version control, and Git is the most popular out there. If you have the desire to work as a developer, it will be worth your while to learn Git. Let's take a look at some basic Git commands. Over here you can see that I have created them in some form of groups, but this is just for you to easily understand what these commands are associated with and what they do in Git. Now we have Git init. Git init allows you to initialize a Git repository on your local machine. So if you want to open or start a new Git repository, you use the Git init command. And then the next command is git clone. Git clone allows you to fetch or grab an already initialized repository from a website like GitHub or Bitbucket. Now, Git and GitHub are not the same. GitHub and Git are very different things altogether. Whilst Git is a versioning tool, GitHub is a website where we store or host our repository that we have created. Moving on, we have Git config and Git remote. These I have classified as configurations. They are used to configure user settings and system settings. Take git config for example. Git configs allows you to configure the username and then the user's email, and this is important when you are trying to locate or send your information to GitHub or Bitbucket or any third-party software that hosts your repository. And then we have Git remote. Git remote allows you to manage the remote repositories that are associated with your local repository. So one of the things that Git remote does is it allows you to list all the remotes that you have. It also allows you to add a new remote and to rename and remove the remotes that you have in your system. So basically the remote I'm talking about here is just your external host or your repository that is on the remote server. That is what I mean by the remote. And all these remote repositories are represented with a URL. So Git remote allows you to take command over these repositories and to decide what to do with them. Then we have git add, git status, and git commit. These I have put under the tracking commands. Now these three sort of represent the actual workflow of Git, in that when you add a new file to your Git repo, you use the git add command, and then once you have done that, it is added to a staging area. But then the git status allows you to check whether that file has actually been tracked or not. So the git status will give you the state of your file, and then after you have added and checked that the file is being tracked, you can now commit. When you commit, it is like saving your file to Git's inner database where it will be stored, and then the file will be tracked from there on. And then we have the updating commands. We have git pull and then we have git push. Now git pull is like just what it sounds like. You are fetching an information from a remote repository and you are bringing it to your local repository. That is what git pull does. It takes from your remote and then it updates your current work with it. Usually when you're working in development or you're working with a team that is working from different places, someone has already pushed some work onto the remote, and then git pull allows you to retrieve that work. It allows you to update your work with everybody else on the same project. So at every point in time, it allows you to keep in sync with everyone else. Now git push is the opposite of git pull. Git push allows you to send your personal work to the remote repository. So you have finished your work, you have finished your feature, and you have to push it so that it will update the current work, and then everybody will have access to the files you have pushed. Then we have git branch and git merge. These come under branching and merging. And like I said earlier on in the previous slides, the git branch allows you to set up sort of a workstation on the side, and then you can do whatever you have to do. And then when you're done, the git merge allows you to put that work back into the repository, and then you have a complete work. So these are the most used basic commands in Git. And if you know these commands, you can easily start using Git. 80% of what you will do in Git will center around these commands. This is by no means a full list of all Git's commands, but these are just basic commands that you can use to get yourself started quickly in Git. Now, there is one last command I've not spoken about on the list, which is the git help. Now, git help is more like a utility command that allows you to look at the features of every other command. So let's say you can git help on the git add command. You want to find out what the git add command can do or what the git add command does. You can use git help add to see what the git add can do. It will give you all the flags that are within git add. Now, what do I mean by flags? Flags are extra information that is usually attached to the commands to make them do a certain kind of work. Every command has flags, and as we go through this, I will begin to show you what these things mean. For now, I just want you to have a fair idea of what these things are and what they do in Git. Okay, so from here we're going to look at how to install Git. To check whether you have Git already installed on your system, you can use the git version command. As you can see over here, git -- version. If you do this, it will show you the git version if Git is already installed. If Git is not installed, it's going to tell you that Git is not a recognized command in your system. So once that is done, we can head over to the Git URL and then we can download Git from there. Alright, so you're here at the Git download webpage. So we're going to enter and then see how we can get Git onto our local system. So once here we can see on the left pane, we can see an about, documentation, downloads. In the downloads we can see there's a download for Mac, Windows, and then Linux. But I'm on a Windows, so I'm not going to spend so much time on the Mac and the Linux. I'll go straight to download for Windows right over here. I'm going to click on download. Then I'm going to choose the 64-bit for Windows setup. You can choose any of them as meets your PC requirements, but I'm going to pick the 64-bit. So that should start my downloads right here. Now, looking at this, you can look at the documentation. I want to say that documentation is so important. If you want to learn software development, it's very important to get abreast with documentation. Here you can see there's the reference manual, and then there is also the Pro Git book. These references and resources are the best resources on Git you can get anywhere. Aside this video and any other video you watch on Git, the best place to learn Git is with the reference manual and with the Pro Git book. You can download this book for free, written by Scott Chacon and Ben Straub. They are the top people in Git, and you can always reference here, look through it. As you can see, it shows up all the list of commands. Like I was talking earlier, the list of commands go beyond just the basics I showed you. The setup and config commands are here. You can just go through them, and then for any of them you can just pick it up and then you can just go through it. It just shows you all the flags that are associated with the git config. You can go through them and then you can learn about everything over here. This is a valuable resource, and I highly recommend that you always go and take a look at. Now I'm going to go back and just brush through. If you're on a Mac, you can always use the homebrew package manager to download Git onto your system. If you don't have the homebrew package manager, you can get it. And once you have the homebrew package, you can just go and type brew install Git, and that would install Git on your Mac OS for you. The same can be said for the Linux version. With Linux, there are many different kind of distributions, so based on your distribution, you should always check out with your distribution type and then you can download Git onto your system. But most Linux distributions usually come with a Git installed already, so you shouldn't have so much problem if you are using Linux. But you can always use the sudo apt-get install, and then you can just run this command over here and Git will be installed for you. So I think my installation is done. I'm just gonna click on my installation to begin my Git installation. I'm gonna click on run. Mind you, this is on Windows, so if you are on Windows, you're not gonna have any problems. You just follow as I'm doing and we'll be done. So I'm gonna click on next, and then I'm gonna click, if you want to see Git on your desktop, you can click on that, but I'm gonna choose next. And then over here you can choose any sort of editor you want. You can make Vim your editor, you can use Visual Studio Code, you can use Notepad, Atom, all of them are great. Sublime Text, you can use any of them, but I'm gonna leave it as the default and I'm gonna continue. And then over here you can override the default branch name. Now I spoke about branch in the previous slides. You can choose a name for your branch, so it comes default with main. You can choose to use any word like master, trunk, development, any of them are fine. But when you go to GitHub, you realize that GitHub also initializes your repositories with main. So based on your requirement, you can choose main or master. I think I'm going to choose master just so that it can make the tutorial a little bit more exciting. So I'm going to click on next, and over here I'm going to leave this as the recommended. Now this one adds a couple of minimal Git wrappers to your Windows path, which means that you will be able to use the normal settings that Git comes in with. Now you can choose to use Git with optional Unix tools from the command prompt. This is a very powerful option which allows you to import some keywords and some kinds of tools from the Unix system. Now you remember that Unix and Windows are not synonymous. Whilst we have some keywords in Unix that run on Linux, we don't have those keywords in Windows. So when you are using this option, you have to be sure that you are very familiar and you are comfortable using the shell or the Linux bash commands. So if you are good with that, this would be the best option for you. But if you are still new and you are still now getting into software development and you don't know so much about Linux, you can choose this. So I'm going to choose this. I'm going to click on next. I'm going to leave this as is, and then I'm going to click on next. I'm going to leave this as it is. The same for here, and here, and here. I'm not going to experiment with any new thing. I'm going to leave that as is. I'm going to go next. So if you already have a Git installation on your system, the new installation is going to act as an update. It's going to remove the previous Git and it's going to install the latest Git version. So I have already installed Git, so it's simply going to remove the old installation and then it's going to replace it with the new installation. Okay, so our Git installation looks like it's about to finish. Installation. Okay, I'm not gonna click on this, otherwise it's gonna give me some welcome and thank you notes and all that. I don't need that. But I'm gonna click on launch Git Bash. Git Bash is the default terminal that comes with Git. I'd recommend that you use that always when you're using Git. It'll get you to learn how the Linux shell commands are used, which would benefit you greatly. So I'm gonna click on finish. I'm gonna launch Git Bash. Nice. My Git Bash is ready right here. So I'm going to run the same Git version I used to check whether Git was installed. I'm going to type Git, sorry. it's a flag, so I'm going to use dash dash version, and then this should show me that I have Git version 2.42.0 Windows. So that is to show that I have Git installed. Now you can use this as well with your normal CMD. You can just use the Git in your Windows CMD as well. It all works just fine. So if I do the git version, it's still going to tell me that I have the latest version of Git. So this is how Git works. Whatever is working here can be used here if you know the commands to use. So in the next video, we're going to talk about how to use these commands in real life. We're going to practice how to track a file. We'll create a document. We will track it from the time it was created. We will update it, and then we will track and add those updates to the file. And then we're going to look at how to set up GitHub. We're going to create an account. If you already have one, that is great. So we're going to enter a GitHub account, and then we are going to see how we can connect GitHub to our local system, so that when we initialize our Git repository, we can send it over to our Git account where it shall be saved as a backup. So that's the whole point of distributed version control system. But thank you anyway for watching. If you love this content and you like how it is going, hit the like button, subscribe to this channel. We are yet to enter the more exciting phases of this tutorials, so don't get left behind. I like to see your comments as well. Let me know whether you like this or that. Just hit me up in the comments and I'll hit you back up. In the next video, we're going to dive straight in and we're going to do so much. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next video.